Welcome to the Nonprofit Podcast, where we uncover the secrets to scaling impact in the nonprofit world. I'm your host, Tom Kelly. Today, we're joined by Krissy Webb, the driving force behind Student Aces. Krissy will share her insights on nonprofit success and the journey of building an organization from the ground up. Welcome, Krissy.
Hi, Tom. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about Student Aces and how has the organization evolved since inception?
Well, Student Aces, so ACE stands for Athletics, Community, and Education. So in 2012, I had twin daughters. They're identical twins. And my dad and I were driving in a U-Haul. Similar to your story with your mom, we're driving in a U-Haul, and I said, "Who's going to be the future leaders of our country, and what does that look like?" So my dad and I got into this in-depth conversation about role models and where they're teaching these leadership, characteristics and core values and character education. And so from there, it really guided our work to what is Student Aces today, which our mission is to create champions. And the word champions is our core values. So from that conversation, my dad was an executive at a big power company, Florida Power and Light, and retired a few years after. And so now Student Aces offers 5 programs, character and leadership programs throughout South Florida.
Nice. And what are some success stories that you have since you started and the impact it's had on some young people's lives?
The success stories lie in our youth that we worked with. We hear from a lot of our students, on a weekly basis. Now, our first group of students that we worked with this was 11 years ago. So imagine they're 27, 28 years old in the workforce. So you start to hear things like, in the class we learned this, but I didn't realize it until now what work ethic meant, or what respect and trust and these core values that we learned in the program. So the success lies within our youth that we've gotten, we're blessed to work with in all of our programs. The other, some of the success stories, there's a big success story was in Belle Glade, which is a very impoverished community. It's about 45 minutes west in Palm Beach County of the most wealthiest zip code in Palm Beach Island. And we were approached by Bank of America, and they had a bank building on Main Street. And they said, "Would you guys be interested in this building? We want to give it to you for your programs for the students." So that was in 2019 when we had the grand opening. And now we operate daily programs for high school student athletes out in Belle Glade. So that's a big success story. But we have success stories, all of the time in different capacities where we get to see these kids in action.
How do you measure the success and the effectiveness of the Student Aces programs?
Okay, so in the beginning, we just knew. Right. So you can see, you hear from the kids, you hear the testimonials, you're capturing on video, and you're making these videos, and you're having events, and you're recognizing these kids. But we were challenged, I'd say, with the board and myself, and just to say, okay, what does the hard data look like? And how do we capture that? Right. Because it's very hard to capture hope or confidence or different things that are not grades or, a number that's moving, right? So we had a strategic planning meeting 2 years ago. So we're in our second year of a 3-year strategic plan. And part of that plan was bringing on an evaluator and really fine-tuning our programs to make them research informed so that we're able to measure those things like hope and resiliency and how do you really know the program works. So we've brought on a phenomenal evaluator of our programs and streamlined everything and worked really hard over the last year and a half to make sure that we have that proof. Everybody wants to know that, right?
Yeah. So Student Aces has grown significantly since its inception. What strategies have you employed to raising funds and garner support from other organizations?
I would say our approach was a little bit different. I'm blessed to grow up in an area that my dad was a business person. I know a lot of different people in this community, in Palm Beach Gardens. And so those relationships, a lot of the relationships with the businesses were already there. And we actually didn't raise money for the first 2 years. We wanted to make sure that we had a solid program. My dad funded the organization for the first 2 years. We wanted to make sure that before we were asking for money, we had a solid foundation. And that was something that we worked hard at. And we also said that we're never going to charge a student for the programs. So what does that look like in terms of financial stability? So we wanted to make sure that we had a diversified funding portfolio. So we have businesses, private foundations, individual donors, events. And the private foundations, we heard a lot of no's before we started hearing yeses. And the strategy was really just get our information out there, and building those relationships. And so I wrote the grants myself because I felt like nobody would be able to tell the story and write the grants better than myself, because I was so involved with the day-to-day of the organization. I wanted to make sure that if we were going to bring somebody on, I would be able to teach that person how to operate the organization. So it was a lot of no's before yeses. We have a lot of local businesses that support us, but a lot of national businesses that support us as well. So building those relationships. And then I would say, another strategy that has been successful for us is working together as a partnership, right? So a lot of organizations give you this menu of you have this, 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 and this, right? But the company or the foundation may not want any of that. So in that relationship and in that conversation, it's working with the partner to say, okay, how is this going to best benefit you? And are you looking to hire, young people? And I'm just giving an example. If you're looking to hire young people, what are those characteristics so that we can keep our eye out for that company when working with the students or somebody that we know. So it's really about getting to know the partner that you're working with and then building that relationship. So I would say that that's been the biggest success strategy that I found.
Has there been any strategy around the private foundations and really kind of building the story to try to get the private foundations, the private family foundations on board?
A lot of work. A lot of work to really navigate what their interest is, right? So a lot of private foundations don't accept unsolicited proposals. Mm-hmm. So that doesn't mean that you can't give them information about what you're doing if it aligns, but you have to borderline not being obnoxious because you don't want to turn them off. So we've had some success in that space of, okay, maybe this is an innovative approach and we just want to inform, because we create all of our programs within the organization. So innovation is our strength and nobody else is doing what we're doing because it's very innovative. So when we reach out, it might just be hey, this is what we're doing in this area, and then you don't hear back from them for a couple of years. But then maybe one day, which has happened to us, maybe one day, a couple of years later, they say, here's our LOI or here's an application. We want to hear more about your program. So with anything, it doesn't come easy. I hear from a lot of different people like, hey, is there a grant for this? Or, hey, I want to start, reaching out to organizations for grant money. I'm like, okay, that's great. But it is a lot of work and you have to really know your stuff. And you have to really be able to answer those key questions that they're asking. So it's just relationship building. And some of those never come to fruition, but some of them do. And then you're able to scale accordingly, right? Some cap a certain amount every year and they're not going to move from that, but some increase, give you more support and increase that amount per year.
What are some of the key qualities you look for in mentors and community leaders who are involved with student ACEs?
That's hard. So if I were to tell you that, we would take anybody to be a mentor for the students, I would be lying, because the one thing you can't do is let down young people. So as adults and business people, we go through the day, right? We get very busy. And if you get so busy, then you have to move a meeting, right? Well, with young people, that might be the only thing that they're looking forward to in a day. So a lot of businessmen and women don't understand that, or people of influence don't understand that, how much that can let down a kid. So we like to incorporate mentors and people of influence in our programs. So that way it's not so reliant on that relationship right there. Our staff in Belglade are all mentors to our students. So it's more group mentor focused. And then, in our other programs, I might be working with the students, or, my dad or the board members, or, Jamie, who handles our PR and communications. She may take one of the students may be interested in that field. So then we connect them accordingly. But the biggest thing that we look for is making sure that none of the kids are let down or there's empty promises made.
I can imagine that is a big thing that you're constantly thinking about in the back of your head, is like, am I providing value? Am I providing influence? And am I making changes? Is it getting through? How do you balance your role as a leader in the nonprofit sector, as like a mentor, a coach, a mom? It's kind of everything, right?
Bad. No kidding. Not the best. I'm not the best role model for balancing, but I love everything that I do. So it doesn't feel like work to me. My role has, as the organization has grown, now I say a real executive director, right? So I have to deal with IRS or, bookkeepers and so on and so forth, where in the beginning, it was such a small organization that I would be more involved with the students. So that's hard. But finding balance in organization. So that is the key to success with anything, is just making sure they organize. And I have somebody that works with me just on that, builds my agendas for my team meetings, helps me with my board meetings. Everything is so organized, color coded in my role as an executive director. And then as a mom, I'm blessed to have my role in the nonprofit space where I can pick up my kids from school, but then I'll be working at night, which is fine, because that's what I chose. And I love it. I love being able to spend time with my daughters and their friends. And then I also coach their travel softball team. So, but those kids and the young people fuel my energy as an executive director, to be able to keep going and saying, okay, this is what's needed. And then I'm able to see, now that my daughters are 12, I'm able to see the needs leading up to the population that we serve with high school students. So I'm able to kind of correlate that, which is really cool, to see middle school transitioning into high school. So I'd say organization is key to balance, being structured and then being honest, right? Not taking, if you can't do it, saying no, which is very hard. I know a lot of people struggle with that, but it took a while to say no and to delegate. Those were two of my weaknesses. So am I great at it? I'm still working on it. It's a process.
Well, I can definitely relate to you about a 12-year-old in softball. My daughter's in travel softball, and every weekend we're at tournaments. And I don't know if you could see my softball tan, but yeah, we live in Illinois, so okay. we get a 50-degree sunny day, and everybody gets burned out there. It's quite fun, but it's very time consuming. So, can you share any moments that have really impacted you personally since starting, Student ACEs?
One of the biggest impacts for me was in our second year of program. So we have 5 programs. So our flagship program is what we started with. We started with 32 students from 8 different schools. So 2 females, 2 males. And that made the 32 private schools, public schools. We wanted charter schools, a couple homeschool kids. We wanted to make sure that we had a good sample size. When we started that, the kids were excused from school each month to come for a day of character and leadership. And that was our pilot program. Then our first full year, we expanded to 64 student athletes. high school student athlete, juniors. And juniors being that they can go back into their school senior year and be leaders on campus. So that's how you create positive behavior change on high schools. And that's what the schools were telling us, that you start with athletes because athletes are the leaders on their campuses. And that first full year of programming, a girl, Rebecca Tucker, who was in that program, was a leader by far. I mean, she was the communication point for a lot of the students. She was keeping everybody up to speed on things, built a really good relationship with Becca. She went on to South Carolina. She was still we hired her part-time. She was doing some projects for me while going to school up in South Carolina. And then she was our first full-time hire as a COO. So she worked with me for 8 years, and then she just got a big opportunity with the Palm Beach Zoo. And I couldn't be more proud of her. So while a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, you're losing your right-hand person, Rebecca, where I'm saying I'm super proud of the woman that she's become, because she's growing. And, so that was a really cool moment, as much as I hated losing her as our COO, but for her to take that role and further her career. And then you have kids that really just change. I mean, they all just change your life. So where people say, oh, they're so blessed to have you, I look at it from a different perspective, that I'm so blessed to have them, because what you hear in the news today is like, oh my God, we're in so much trouble because of our future kids and blah, 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 whatever. I think that there's so many great young people that have the opportunity if they just have the tools. So I get to see those kids firsthand. Another one of our students, Alexa, she was in our program, our flagship program, 2 years ago. So she then started helping coach. She's a softball player, started helping coach my daughters. And so that is really full circle. And then she was interning with us. She got a full ride to Harvard for softball. So she's going to go to Harvard. And so that is a full circle moment also, where you get to see these kids go through your program, and then you get to see them use the tools that they learned with future generations. And we've had that with football players, with basketball players, with flag football players. So that's very full circle. The last thing I'll say, which really changed my life, is the same situation as Becca, where we're in Belgrade and at the Student ACES Center. 3 individuals that are working there right now graduated from our flagship program. So they're now impacting their community and the lives of other kids. So that's when and you're just so proud of them, because they feel like your own kids. So when you see it full circle, it's very, very rewarding.
What advice would you give other nonprofit leaders who are creating their own lasting impacts and scaling their organizations? What do you kind of wish you knew then that you know now that helps to scale your organization?
That there's different levels of hard. Okay, so what I mean by that is that you start getting these grants, right? And you're like, oh my gosh, we got a $10,000 grant or a $20,000 grant. And that sounds like you won this. I mean, when you start getting those first couple of grants, it's like, you can do so much, right? And then you start having these other added costs, like if you have a physical location or insurances, or as you're scaling. And then you're at this next level of hard, meaning that, oh my gosh, now I have to raise this much money, and it's hard, right? To go from a $10,000, $20,000 grants to a $50,000, $100,000 is very, very difficult. So you can't get frustrated or ever stop, right? You have to work your butt off, and you have to work harder than anybody else, because you feel passionate about your mission. So that's the hard part, is when you get, they're saying, oh my gosh, you grew so much, but I have to raise more money because we didn't raise money for the first 2 years. And now our budget's about $1.3 million. And with the COVID times, I don't know if there's a lot of organizations talking about this, but there was so much money from private foundations and entities that there was an influx, and nonprofits were given the opportunity to receive a lot of money. So when you do that, you grow programs or you take on more students, whatever the case may be for each organization. But then you're here, right? So you've grown and you're increasing, but then you're relying on monies that maybe aren't necessarily going to come each year. So that's hard is, it may not be the same each year. So my advice for, nonprofits is that find that balance of, is this something that we're going to have to bring, raise money for each year, and how much money is that? And then figure that out, because you might have a year of a loss, or which doesn't mean, because you should, most nonprofits should have money in reserves to operate their nonprofit. And a lot of people don't really talk about that. I think in the nonprofit space, it's like, oh, all nonprofits should be broke all the time. But my job as the executive director is to make sure that my employees and this have a paycheck coming in, and that the students have programs that they're relying on. So you just have to be smart in that capacity of how you're either investing your funds, how your portfolio is diversified, and really be, I guess the word is, aware of everything that's going on, whether it's in the private foundation space, the business space, because right now, a lot of private foundations and businesses aren't supporting as much as they were, say, a couple of years ago with financial times.
With, I work with scaling smaller nonprofits, and the first thing I talk to them about is like, you need to just increase your mindset about, you will need a location. You will need to most likely hire employees. So get this, like you said, all nonprofits think that they should be broke, out of your head, because you needed a run rate of a few months, so that when the donations do dry up for a few months, you can still operate your foundation, because in the long run, you want to just increase your mission and do, more work in the community. And during COVID, for private foundations, they changed the what you can deduct on your taxes. So your adjusted gross income during COVID, they increased it so you can deduct 100%. And then after that ran out, it's back down to 30%. So when you have that influx of cash during that time, it was nice. But now, they can only move or deduct 30% now. So now everything kind of changes. It'd be nice if they kind of increase that, so these foundations that support so many local charities can kind of give them even more. So we'll see what happens, in the future, and anything that changes there would be nice and a bonus.
Yeah, absolutely.
So as a mentor to basically hundreds of children, and knowing that your big thing is how do I just not disappoint, right? How do I just be that leader and keep moving them forward? What advice do you often find yourself giving to young people, kind of navigating the challenges of their lives?
The advice that I would give to young people is outwork other people, right? So with balance, but always keep learning, right? So I think one of the biggest areas of, I don't know the best word to say, what young people struggle with the most is critical thinking. Because all of the information is right in front of them, Google or looking it up online. So they're not taught to critically think about things, right? So I'm going to stand up for this, because I saw it on social media or whatever the case may be. My challenge to them is always, okay, why? And then push them why, so that they start thinking for themselves and really build their core value system to be decision makers, or to bring something to the table in the business space or into their families and their future. So I really push them to think. And all of our programs are designed like that. So team building, case studies, interactive, or role play. Everything that we do is interactive, because with young people, when you just put a PowerPoint on or you just speak at them, it doesn't work. So I apologize to anybody who's doing that that's listening, but we worked really hard on our curriculum. And now when we put up our PowerPoints, it's about 5 minutes of speaking, and then we go straight into interactive, straight into case studies, straight into that role play, because the attention span of our youth these days is very short. And so we're all challenged with that adjustment, right? So how do they learn? How do they absorb information? The battle of the information that you're teaching them versus the social media or what they're seeing, because you can only control when you have them in your programs. Once they go out, you hope that you've given them those skill sets to think about things before they act. And I think one of the biggest challenges that we face is social media. While it's good for several reasons, it's a challenge for young people, and we'll find out as we go some of the impacts of it.
Yeah, I like your approach to always questioning why they came up with that answer, because I can see with social media, most people, they see something and they believe it immediately because it was on TikTok or Instagram. And, a lot of that stuff is just clickbait or fake news or whatever it may be, just to kind of spur an emotional reaction. But you have to teach them and push them to, think for themselves. And I love your approach to that.
Thank you.
Looking ahead, what's your vision and goals for the future for Student ACEs? And, how do you plan to continue expanding the reach and impact?
So we, with our strategic plan, as I mentioned, we put together a 3-year strategic plan, and that was really to work on our program offerings. So how do you set those programs up so that they can be either replicated or impact other communities? So we've had our first year of our streamlined curriculum that we think that one of the programs under there that can be evidence-based programming, meaning that you can literally package it and it can go to an underserved community. And that's the Passport program. So the Passport program is 7 different guiding principles. So you have academic advising, career prep, college readiness, personal development, health and wellness, mental health, and character. And so the students have to do tasks. The curriculum is all, they can do it themselves, which is each task takes about 5 or 10 minutes. And that pathway will be successful for them for either graduation, getting into college, what you need in the workforce. For example, they do interactive job interviews or personal statements, or they have to write a resume, different things like that they get stamps and then they get incentives. They can pick from an incentive case. We have all kinds of fun prizes. So that program we find can really change the landscape for a lot of schools, because the guidance counselors are so inundated and overwhelmed right now that it's to help support the guidance counselors working really hard with the students. This is just, another tool, because what we found was that everything was kind of in different silos. So this program brings all of that together for students. So that's how we see ourselves expanding, is because we teach the classes ourselves, because we're very present. It's how do you put together these programs that can be replicated in different communities, and which programs are those? So that's what we're working on right now. And making sure that each student receives the same level of programming, right? Because you have some of for example, our Captain Summit, which we bring in team captains from all over different schools. And we have up to 250 high school captains in one setting, right? You have rivals, you've got kids from all different places, but you only have them for one day, versus like our flagship program where we have 72 student athletes, juniors, for 20 hours over the course of the school year. So you get to know those kids, a little bit better because you have them for a longer period of time. So how do you make sure that your program is so impactful that they're getting what they need and you're not wasting their time? So that's what we're working on right now, that we can scale, because those kids are the ones that are taking that information and impacting others. So that's what you want. You want that they know it inside out that they can go on to their teams and in their community and at their schools and really make an impact.
Yeah, that's great. How can people, where can they find you? How can they follow the journey? Where can they get involved?
So our website, we just changed our domain. We've gone through a lot of different changes in a good way with our team. So we're studentaces.org. And then my email address is Krissy, Krissy, @studentaces.org. Our LinkedIn is for businesses and for other nonprofits. Our LinkedIn is the most up to date. I'd say on a regular basis, there's stories and all kinds of information on LinkedIn. We are revamping our social media because unfortunately we lost everything on Facebook and Instagram. Someone is trying to buy ads, so our best place to find information on social media is LinkedIn.
Nice. Real quick on that last point about Facebook and Instagram. Did your accounts get hacked and they shut them down?
Yes.
So as part for other nonprofits that may be listening, what advice would you have for them to make sure that that doesn't happen?
I don't even know because there's no customer service number. Like you can't speak to someone. So what happened in our situation was somebody tried to buy $568 worth of ads. I don't know what those ads were because when I went to log in, it was gone. So that was through when we set up Instagram and Facebook, we were so small, it was under my personal. So I have a personal Facebook account and then I set up a page. So I would say to find someone that is very good at social media that can prevent those things from happening because now we're having to start all over again. So I would say find a professional if that's where all of your information is going to be and you're really heavily, focused a lot on social media. I would definitely find a professional that could set you up in that way because we lost everything. I lost everything on my personal and my organization's pages.
Well, hopefully everything gets back up and running quickly, and you have an even bigger following with the new accounts. But Krissy Webb with Student Aces, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. We wish you a lot of success in the future.
Thank you, Tom. And I'm always happy to answer any questions. If anybody is a new nonprofit, because I've been there, feel free to reach out.
That sounds great. We'll make sure to include all the information in all the bios and have a great day. Thanks, Krissy.
Thanks, Tom.